Hey guys, Rollout here, and welcome again to Builder's Block. Now, right out of the gate, if you came in expecting another month of daily creations built by myself, well then, I immediately apologize, because this time we're going to be doing something a little different. March of 2017 was a big month for LEGO displays happening in Portland, Oregon. And so on today's episode, instead of showcasing a collection of my own designs, first I'll be taking you on a tour through this year's Bricks Cascade convention, and then after that, we'll move on to Nathan Soea's Art of the Brick exposition at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. I attended both of these events to gather a boost of inspiration from MOCists of all shapes and sizes. I took a wealth of pictures, and now I'd like to share some of the amazing things that really stood out to me with the rest of you. So stick around and enjoy as I walk through and discuss a whole lot of LEGO that isn't mine for a change. Bricks Cascade is usually held around the start of the year at the Oregon Convention Center, and to be honest with you, I had never actually been. Year after year, I always just seemed to miss the mark because for one reason or another, the only time it ever really occurred to me that this is a thing that happens was well after it had already happened, and since I never even visited before, I was hesitant to just sign up early. But as I understand it, this convention goes on for 4 days, and 2 of those days are for MOCists to bring their own creations, share them with fellow builders, enter contests, and hang around for some kind of mysterious private shindig. I'm sure it's a fun time, I wouldn't know. But for the next 2 days, the doors are open to the public, and the convention becomes sort of like Portland's own Comic-Con, except for displaying LEGO. This year, it was kind of funny because I was sitting at home in March practicing my daily routine where I build something every morning, and all of a sudden, I was reminded of Bricks Cascade. I don't know why, but I thought, hey, I wonder when that is, and by total coincidence, it just so happened to be March 11th, and the event was happening right then. So I was busy for the rest of that night, but on a complete whim, I went ahead, bought a ticket, drove up to Portland first thing on the 12th, and was there for the final day. Now, I didn't take pictures of everything, of course, just a handful of creations which caught my attention in a certain way, or gave me interesting ideas. So I guess you could say I captured anything that got my gears turning? I'm sorry, but you should probably prepare yourself for at least a couple more really cringy segues, because although the models I'm showing off here are a pretty diverse collection, I'm going to attempt crafting some sort of linear narrative, so just do your best and bear with me. And now I wish I'd seen a LEGO bear. Anyway, the first couple things here are probably going to be a little bit miscellaneous. This here was just a Technic table, just some autonomous creations, and these in particular I took a picture of because they seemed feasibly something that I could build. They were these balls of gears that spun in tandem with each other, and I thought that was a really cool idea. I might try attempting something like this at some point. You're probably going to hear me say that a whole lot over the course of this video. Another thing on the convention floor were just these massive and impressive displays. This here was this gigantic battleship that I think was nearly minifigure scale. You can see all of these sailors and soldiers on the deck of the ship. There are all these lighting effects which really added to the presentation. I could be wrong, but I think there might have been some audio to this as well, maybe some background music. Anyway, I thought it was super, super cool. Another very interesting presentation here. Minecraft Creeper and Pig, which I believe were almost like scale to a child, so kids could use this as like a photo op, I suppose. There was the background, of course, and everything like that. I thought those were really well done. You can see the tables back here. This is pretty much how the convention was set up, with all of these things displayed on tables. These in particular are some like larger bricks. They're like normal Lego bricks that have been scaled up, and that is just a very cool idea. The Ant-Man set from a couple years ago did something like that, and I was just fascinated by it, and this is sort of that sort of thing, but perfected. I especially like how these vented pieces here still have visible studs beneath them, and I think this brick here was very well done as well. Now, this is probably a good point for me to mention that all of these creations had some kind of card displayed along with them that had the name of the creation and the name of the person who built it. Now, the problem with that is that most of these people were credited with their real life names and not their online persona, whatever that might be. So it was a little bit difficult for me to find these people so that I could credit them in the description of this video. Now, this one here, the person's online name is actually the name of this creation. That made things convenient, but look in the description, and if you notice something here that is familiar and you know where to find it and it is not present down below, then definitely let me know where to find it, because I definitely want to give credit where credit is due. With that out of the way, moving on to some more scale models. Here we have a pretty much one-to-one 10th Doctor's sonic screwdriver, along with his glasses. Some of these creations had little plaques next to them that had words printed on bricks. I think that's an interesting way to display them. You also have Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto back here. A very simple creation, but I think pretty well done. Some more Marvel. Here is a vignette, obviously, of Thor summoning some lightning with Mjolnir. I think the way the lightning was done was particularly intriguing, with like these bones and beams and droid arms and even a skeleton leg back here. It was super weird. I've never seen something like this done before, and I might want to try it at some point in the future. Even more, you have a large figure of Deadpool here, as well as Ghost Rider. This one was awesome. It had lighting effects on the inside of it, so the chest and the head lit up. I thought the way the chains were done was also pretty cool. You also have a large figure of Stan Lee back here, which I think was actually signed by Stan Lee, so that is awesome as well. Speaking of pop culture legends, there is also this figure of Robbie Rotten from Lazy Town, from the memes. I actually saw this online beforehand and certainly wasn't expecting to see it here, so it was kind of a nice surprise. We're on kind of a roll here. Let's try another segue. On the subject of beautiful music, this was actually one of my favorite things I saw at the convention, just because when I saw Moana, obviously the Bionicle nerd in me thought they said Mata Nui the first time they said Moto Nui, so this kind of realizes that for me, and I got a really big kick out of this one. You have Maui kind of, well, apparently pulling up the island of Mata Nui. You have some kind of Great Spirit robot sculpture there. You also have Holly in this little boat here, which is kind of cute. It's like a minifigure of Holly, and I think they used a cow mask from one of the old customizable Bionicle pins. So that is a very interesting parts usage. Next up, we have another vignette, this time a very complex one. I love the detail put into this with the chandelier and the moose head on the back wall. You have this staircase coming down and this very complex looking organ in the back. I love the chairs and the legs of those chairs. That's very clever. I also like the gamblers sitting around the table throwing down money. And what's like money? Treasure? Is that too far of a stretch? I don't know, but this was in sort of a pirates section of the convention, all kinds of piratey creations, and this one definitely caught my eye. It's a very cool display. You have this gigantic treasure chest with some smaller chests inside it, and they keep going down until you have a minifigure-sized chest here, all full of treasure. Now, of course, some of these coins are not actual Lego, but you do have some Lego brick-built medallions there and some jewelry. I like the bangles and especially the tiara back here. Just a really cool idea. Some more pirates. This was actually in the micro towns section. You have the Queen Anne's Revenge, I believe that is, as well as the Black Pearl. I really like how the cannon fire was done here, just some very effective micro models. You also have this sort of micro suburb. This really got me thinking about making some micro buildings of some kind. I really like the trees and the windows especially. Now this was extremely impressive. This is sort of a downtown Portland skyline done in 1:1000 scale, and the detail put into this is simply incredible. Like all the little streets and all the buildings and each of the tiny little landmarks. I absolutely love it. Now this was actually built by the same guy who did those scaled up bricks I showed you earlier on. There's his website. Some of these builders actually had little business cards displayed next to their models, and that is a pretty good idea as well. All right, moving on to some more architecture here. You have this medieval castle, and I don't even know where to start with this thing. Like, it is so complex and detailed looking, and this is coming from somebody whose building style is very simplistic and streamlined and blocky. And I can't even imagine building something like this. But as you can see, it won some sort of award here. It has a trophy and a ribbon. All of the awards given away at this event are actually brick built, which is super cool. I imagine this one won something in architecture. Definitely well deserved. Here you have another medieval creation, this one from Lord of the Rings. Obviously from The Hobbit, you have all of the dwarves in barrels going down the river. I really like the way that the waterfall was done here, as well as the rapids, all of the loose, transparent bricks in there. Very cool. Here is another movie scene. This is Maz's castle from The Force Awakens with all of the flags at the entrance. A very striking visual from the movie, and this is done with a little bit of liberties taken. I think a lot of these flags are actually custom built. Of course, you do have ones like this from sets and some Star Wars ones, as well as like a shield flag back here, but you also have like a Star of David and like a yin yang symbol. So I don't know, I think a lot of these are custom made flags, but it's still a very cool effect. I think it's kind of funny that you have this Mickey Mouse model looming in the distance, all things considered. I don't know, I find that hilarious. You also have like TIE fighters flying up all around here, and then up top, the singular tower here is exploding, and there are some lighting effects on the inside there, which is a really cool display. Some more Star Wars. This one is the planet of Alderaan after it has been destroyed by the Death Star. So it's just some pieces laid out on a table. I think that is great. This here is kind of a mashup of the Fabuland and Star Wars themes. So you have these very multicolored rainbow-looking vehicles. It's a very interesting aesthetic, but I think it's a testament to how iconic some of these designs are, because they're still recognizable even though none of the colors match. And I think that's a really cool experiment. I think this series was done in many different installments, built by many different people, but you have this Slave One as well, which is just such a good ship design, and I think it still carries through even though none of the colors match, and that is a very cool idea. Now here is a similar concept, some classic spaceships that have been reimagined in an interesting way, this time at both a small scale and at a much larger scale with a more modern approach to the design. This one back here got the same treatment, but this one especially I love the look of. The arrow shape to it is very sleek and very cool. Here are some original spaceship designs that just blow me away. This one, I don't even know how something like this is possible with Lego, to be honest. The shapes are just so organic and the curves are so surreal to look at. The techniques at play here are entirely beyond me. This won some kind of award. Here's a better look at the trophy in this picture here. Some kind of space award. Regardless, it is well deserved. This ship was also designed by the same guy, and it is equally as cool, in my opinion. There's something about this one that really works for me with these bits on top that have those very similar organic shapes to them that I don't even know how to describe. This is another kind of ship, sort of a steampunk flying machine. It's got a boat hull with this face on the front and like a solar cannon on the deck, these 6 rotors. It's a very interesting design. Looks like it won some sort of steampunk vehicle trophy, I want to say. Here is another steampunk-themed creation, a very impressive diorama. This is one of those things that you can just sort of look at it for like an hour and still discover new tiny things in the intricacies. It's got many moving parts. You have these like rails and roller coasters run through there on this side and on this side. I think this carousel might have moved at one point. You had some more moving parts in like this castle section. Just very fun to look at. Back here, you have these very large and robotic arachnids. I wish I would have gotten a better picture of this spider here. In this photo, you can see that the legs are covered in levers to give it like a hairy appearance. I especially love the way this giant scorpion looks. It's very clean looking. The aesthetic really works for me. The colors are great. It's just covered in weaponry. So cool looking. I love that. This is another kind of mecha. This is part of a larger display that was like industrial mechs used for labor. This is some kind of like lumber helicopter lifting up these sheets of wood. I really like the cockpit in the chest here, as well as the rotors on the back. The way the propellers kind of sit back there is a very cool motif. It gave me an idea for maybe a double rotor helicopter transformer where the propellers end up on the back like this. That could be pretty cool. Now here is this giant robot mantis that was right at the front of the convention. I mean, just as you step through the doors, this thing is on the table looking at you. Very eye-catching. The same guy built all of these mecha bugs. And the concept just fascinates me. There's something about these that I really love. Now, while the really big guys are very cool, I probably prefer these smaller beetle bots that were just all over the convention. And to be honest with you, these might be my favorite things that I saw the entire day. I mean, I love the big displays and the castles and the spaceships. Those were all amazing, but these have some sort of charm to them that I just fell in love with. They're these army of multicolored robots that have a bug motif to them, obviously. I guess I just have a thing for insects. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Kamen Rider. That makes sense. But they also have a transformative feature to them. Their armored shells open up to reveal even more weaponry. Like this one has this big cannon that comes through the front sections of the head here. Maybe it's like a grenade launcher. I don't know. The first one I saw here actually wasn't even in the mecha section. It was actually in the micro towns section of the convention, and these were all over the place, like just terrorizing the tiny buildings. I thought that was funny. But you have this red one here that actually opens up to reveal these missiles. I love the way that looks. And again, the concept is just so amazing to me. You have more of these things here, this darker tan one that opens up to reveal like buzzsaws here. You can see they're called battle beetles. You have this red one here with like a multi-barreled cannon. I didn't spot a second one of this white variant, but I think it opens up and reveals like a medical bay. You have this orange one here that the front opens up and there's like a flamethrower. There's a little minifigure riding that one. They're just so cool. I love them. I absolutely love these. Here they are. Here's some more of them. This one opens up and has like a sonic emitter of some kind at the back. Here are a bunch of them terrorizing this spaceship. But seriously, these little beetles stole the show for me. Those with a keen eye might recognize a very iconic color scheme back here. There were several Transformers on display, and I tried to get a picture of every single one because, well, obviously that is sort of in my wheelhouse. These primes were in the mecha section, and despite looking very similar, they actually are two different designs. This one was actually in robot mode when I first walked in. I don't know if these were designed by two different people or the same guy, but whatever the case, and I could be wrong, it seems to me that these were at least somewhat inspired by Boys with the Most Toys. Now, I wish I would have been there to see this one transformed, because that might have been interesting. This group of Transformers was in the pop culture section, and I'm fairly certain that I have seen these before, but when I looked up the name of the builder online, I couldn't find anything. That said, I am also fairly certain that this guy watches my videos, so hey, sorry about that. I really like the style of these. They're very charming, and they come across as very genuine to me. By that I mean, I feel like if LEGO actually made Transformers, this is sort of what they'd look like. He displayed a picture of the alt mode next to each of these, which is not a bad idea. Here is Ratchet and a Megatron. Actually, no picture next to this one. Maybe he just didn't want a photograph of a gun displayed. I don't really know. And then, of course, here is Bumblebee. Again, just a very unique style, and I really like the way these look. The last Transformer I saw there was actually in the Bionicle section, sort of a bioformer Optimus Prime. Now, it says that it transforms, but honestly, I can't really tell how it transforms or what it transforms into. Like, I guess these sort of look like windows and they hinge up, but I can't see any wheels, so maybe it turns into like a Cybertronian hover truck of some kind. See, this is why I avoid making bioformers, because generally they don't end up being very solid vehicles. Regardless, I'd like to see what this transforms into. Again, it seems sort of familiar to me. I feel like I might have seen this head design before, but when I tried looking it up online after the fact, I couldn't find anything, which is a little disappointing. Moving on to some more miscellaneous Bionicle. I can't remember if this is supposed to be Gali or just another blue character wearing a cow, but whatever the case, the majority of the armor here is trans blue, and not only that, I think a good majority of it is actually fluorescent blue, so if you put this under a black light, it'll actually glow, which is a cool idea. I really like the customized mask on this one with the tribal markings. It's also just a very interesting color for an Akaku. I also really like the little glint on each of the lenses. That is a nice touch. Now, the majority of the Bionicle MOCs that I photographed are by Patrick Biggs. You know him as DV or DViddy on a lot of social platforms, and his work is just amazing. I've always been a big fan. Just the sculptural work he does with CCBS and system pieces along with Technic, it is just beautiful. You can see this like thunder dragon. Here's like a reimagining of Korgot, the protector of Earth. Then you also have this like big bad wolf guy here, Chad, the big rad wolf. They all have really cool names for the most part. Of course, you just have like a reimagining of Kopaka here. Even more of this. You have this guy here, sort of a Gali space ranger, this like Chinese style warrior here, and then of course this big long Chinese dragon, which looks amazing. Again, I have always been a big fan of his work, and it was so cool to see all of this in person. Even more here, just a few, this guy, that guy, and kind of a Savage Planet bulk reimagining. Very, very interesting. Now, the final Bionicle creation I wanted to show off here was actually made out of system. It was sort of like an illusion board, an optical thing. I don't really know what you call one of these things, but if you look at it from this angle here, it has some sloped bricks, and you get the image of G2 Pohatu, and then if you look at it from the other side, you have G1 Pohatu, and you can go back and forth here. That is the same creation, just from different angles. Very, very cool. Now, for the last creation I want to show off, we're actually going to go back to this picture here for a second, because in the background here, you can see this very large centerpiece of this year's convention. And from a distance, it sort of just looks like a picture frame on a wall. It's kind of an illusion because from this vantage point, it almost just looks like a mosaic of some kind. But if you look at it up close, it's actually this very in-depth, complex display, like a diorama representation of Mount Hood, which is a very iconic mountain in Oregon. And why I say this is sort of a centerpiece of this year's convention is because Mount Hood is actually in the logo for Bricks Cascade. This thing looks amazing in person, and I think it's kind of hard to convey just how surreal it looks through pictures, because you can look at it from certain angles and get a look inside of it. It's really kind of weird and really amazing. Now, you might not notice it, but this entire wall is also built out of Lego. This light switch here is also built out of Lego, and unfortunately I didn't show it off, but there's also some like crayons on the floor down below, and there's some crayon drawings on this wall that are also made out of Lego. It is such an interesting model, very large and very complex. It really is a piece of art. Here it is from the back. You can see how that backdrop was done with all of these pieces put together and curved in such a way that it even needs this large like PVC pipe to keep it upright. It is so incredibly massive and so incredibly impressive. And that'll just about do it for this year's Bricks Cascade. They were also giving away Series 16 minifigures at the door, so after the convention I went and got dinner, opened this up, and I ended up with a kind of dog show award winner of some kind. He wouldn't be my first choice, but I suppose he's alright. At the end of the day, I am extremely glad that I decided to go. I had so much fun being there for the first time, and hey, now that I've got a feel for what goes on there and how the tables are set up, maybe in 2018, I'll actually register and attend the Builders Convention for real. I can already imagine bringing some of my own creations to display and perhaps meeting a few of you there. After years of putting it off, now the idea is definitely on my mind. But, of course, the next one isn't for a good little while, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. For now, buckle up, because we're not done yet, folks. This is going to be a long one. The Art of the Brick is one of several expositions professional Lego artist Nathan Sawaya has been touring around the world for, I think, years at this point, and from February 18th to May 29th, it came to be featured at OMSI, which is basically the landmark science museum in Portland. It is a wonder that I somehow didn't overdose on amazing Lego creations in March, because I actually visited this display less than a week after I attended Bricks Cascade. And yes, I feel a little spoiled by that. But anyway, while the previous event featured many different builders, building styles, and all kinds of pop culture reference material, this one was a little more streamlined. All of these creations are put together by the same artist, and most of them are built with more of a sculptural technique. The whole exhibit is presented like a gallery, and the models are clearly focused towards and displayed as art installations. So you're probably not going to see any traditional castles or spaceships, and sadly, no transforming insect robot mecha. So what's even the point? Oh well, I guess we'll take a look anyway. This first portion of the exhibit is dedicated to the recreation of classic paintings and tapestries and things like that. This, of course, is the Great Wave, and I love the style in which it was built, where the wave itself sort of comes out of the surface in many layers. It looks very, very cool. A really nice effect with the wave itself, kind of a pixelated look to it. I really like the Japanese letters in the background as well. You can see most of these are kind of secured to the wall with these metal brackets here that have been painted so as not to disrupt the look of the piece, which is interesting. This one here is one of my personal favorite paintings, of course, Van Gogh's Starry Night. And what I love about a lot of these interpretations is that they aren't entirely accurate, but the stylization is very well done. Like if you take this and put it up next to the original, the legitimate Starry Night, there are many inaccuracies, but it very much captures the essence of that original painting, and I love that. This one looks very cool. And this one is another good representation of that. Now, he has a plaque next to all of these where he talks about the original piece, and then he talks about his interpretation, how he approached it. And for this one, he focused a lot more on the colors rather than the shapes. And for what that's worth, again, very well done. I love the colors. They're so beautiful. And I also really, really like the intricate one-by-one details in here. It looks incredible in person. Alright, so for some of these I didn't want to show the entire display, I just wanted to showcase certain elements of the design that I thought were particularly interesting. This is, of course, a touring exhibit, and if it's coming anywhere near you, I highly recommend go checking it out, because nothing really beats the experience of seeing all of these in person, and I wanted to sort of preserve that experience in some way, but this here is one of the earliest pieces of art ever recorded, sort of an animal painted on the wall of an ancient cave, and the way it's presented is very nice. I love the, rocky texture. He kind of incorporated that into his piece, and it's very interesting. This here is some kind of tapestry, I imagine. Admittedly, I'm not entirely familiar with it, but the style of it is very striking. It kind of reminds me of my own in a lot of ways. Very geometric and simplified and studless. Of course, it does have studs, but they're, very deliberate details here. I love the weaved effect along the top and down the sides. For this one here, I just wanted to show off the words built into it. Of course, I'd seen this technique done many times before by many different people, but very well done here. This is a two-dimensional swallow, and I love the contrast here, kind of the very intricate details of the bird itself, as opposed to the otherwise very simple brick-built surface. That was very striking to me. This here is sort of another way to represent words in kind of a very vague style. I love the way the Vitruvian Man here was done, kind of coming out of the page as well. I especially love the split between his actual arm and the page there. That is an extremely cool effect. And then here, of course, another Da Vinci, very famous, the Mona Lisa. Now, this one is amazing to me in a lot of ways. You can see it's a pixel art style, very recognizable, but again, kind of very pixelated. It's an interpretation, obviously, right? But if you step back and sort of squint a little bit, your brain kind of fills in the gaps and it almost looks like the legitimate thing. It's a mastery of illusion, I think, and it just sort of blows me away. I love how this was done. This next one is another experiment in capturing an illusion of sorts, although this one deals with light instead. Here is a stained glass window, of course, hanging from the ceiling, and it obviously looks like Lego, right? I guess the fact that all of these are translucent bricks is impressive in its own right, but what is really amazing is when a light is shined from behind and it projects this almost entirely different picture onto the floor below it. The way the light blends together and changes shape is amazing, and I don't even know how you begin to plan something like this out, but I very much enjoy it. This here is sort of bridging the gap between his paintings and his more sculptural builds. This is an interpretation of Scream. The character itself is built in 3 dimensions, and the background is entirely 2-dimensional. Of course, it's also a little bit more cartoony than the original piece, with the bulging eyes here and some shapes that are defined a little bit more than they should be, but it's still very charming, and I like the way it looks. Speaking of sculptures, the next portion of the exposition was all about ancient pottery and statues. On this one here, I just wanted to point out the technique used on the lips. It's nothing too complex, but it's just something that I never really thought of doing before. Simply enough, it's just jumper plates sticking out of the main surface of the model, but I thought it was sort of cool, very elegant. This is the same technique used in reverse, essentially. Jumper plates used to create indents in the model. Again, very, very simple, but I really liked it. This is a famous Aztec statue, the twin-headed serpent. I really like the speckles of color all throughout it. Just the main color itself is something you don't see every day. I very much liked that as well, and I thought the teeth were very well done. This is another one that I'm not entirely familiar with, but it is this shape of a hand, and I like the integration of transparent pieces. It makes it look very thin and frail, and that's kind of a cool look. Next up is this very classic and iconic piece of Greek pottery. I like how the shape of the vase is still more or less kept intact, despite the detailed scenes depicted on the front and the back. Now, speaking of detail, this is one of my favorite things I saw there. I love the intricacies put into the chest of this very cool-looking Egyptian bust. The face of the bust, I think, looks a little bit different than some of his other work. It's very impressive to me that he can capture these multiple different styles, and this one to me looks sort of like one of the sculptures you'd see at Legoland, which is sort of interesting. Here is another face, one of the Easter Island statues, and this thing is massive. It is like 2 people tall, and I love how it displays that you can get these very organic looking shapes if you build at a large enough scale. It's only built with simple Lego bricks, but because it is so massive, you have these very natural looking curves to it. And that is very inspiring, although something I'll probably never attempt myself. Moving on to some original artwork, pretty much everything from this point is a concept from his own imagination. I liked this one because often you see Lego spheres, of course, but very rarely do you see this sort of teardrop or raindrop shape. Now, this is a group of people walking past a wall with maybe some graffiti on it, abstract shapes and abstract colors all around. When you look at it from this angle, something sort of starts to form, and when you look at it from the perfect vantage point, from a distance, the human eye becomes visible, looking right back at you. I really like that effect a lot. Now, this was in the corner of a large room dedicated to experimenting with the human shape. I really enjoyed this one. It was all of these singing faces attached to music notes that get smaller and smaller as they go up. I really like the idea of essentially building the same thing over and over, but at a smaller and smaller scale each and every time. This is a man sort of disintegrating. I like how it's built sideways and how the spaces in his body sort of correlate to these segments that are dispersing in the wind. This is just a straightforward brick-built wall, but it has this crack running through it, which I just sort of thought was a neat visual. This is a wall with hands coming out of it, pulling a man back as he tries to walk away, and I like how the hand itself was sort of built into his shoulder. Of course, it's a different color differentiating the two, but the whole thing is sort of integrated. It's also very dusty, as you can see. This is a group of skulls on the wall, and I thought it was interesting how there were spotlights on each one, and they kind of reflected onto the floor here, creating these dazzling lights. I don't even know if that was intentional, but it was certainly interesting and something that I'd never even thought of before, like kind of integrating the reflection of the glossy surface into the display. Now, another interesting thing about these skulls is that they're all slightly different. It would have been very easy to make them all built exactly the same, just be different colors, but each one has its own differentiation. Their teeth, their eye shapes, their noses, all just a little bit tweaked each time. I thought that added a lot of character to this creation. The green one here, you might notice, was also just a little bit crooked, which annoyed me way more than it should have. I wanted to fix it, but I also didn't want to touch anything, so I guess I just had to suffer. Another skull, this is a person peeling off their own face, which is a creepy idea alone, but I think even more so because of the striking red eyes. There's something very unsettling about the whole thing. One last spooky, scary skeleton, this time a T-Rex replica. Very large, very impressive. I was lucky enough to get a picture of this thing while nobody else was in the room, which was a rare occurrence because it was very popular. You can see that it is held up by these cables. I'm not sure if it can stand up on its own, but it's also worth mentioning that all of these creations are glued together. Obviously, that's more efficient for display because then nobody can accidentally bump into it and destroy the whole thing. But it does make me wonder if something like this can actually keep itself together without the pieces being glued in place. Honestly, I don't really know, but either way, it looks extremely cool. The next room doesn't have as much of a cohesive theme to it, although I suppose it's just sort of a general celebration of the art form. Here is a very large pencil writing the word fun, suggesting that art should always be fun. A simple idea, but this one stood out to me in a very unexpected way. You can see that the pencil itself is supported by a cable attached to the ceiling, and the way it connects to the base is very unorthodox. It's at a strange angle. However, you'll notice that because of the way it attaches, it needs some flat pieces on top here. But instead of just using 3x1 tiles, he used 3x1 plates and sliced the studs off the top. He actually cut pieces. And I don't see any reason why that was necessary. It just seems like such a strange decision. There are plenty of alternatives, but okay. I'm sure he had his reasons. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, this one was pretty cool. The world around this easel is entirely monochrome, and the painting itself is full of color. I like that. For this one, he talked about how mastering a sphere was essential to his development as a builder. So he created this globe with all of the continents featured on its surface. Very impressive and sort of similar to the vase we saw earlier. Now, my favorite part about this is how it's presented. It's hanging from the ceiling and spins around, and then the spotlight sort of creates these eclipses on the wall that shift. Again, I don't know how intentional that was, but regardless, I really enjoyed it. Of course, the entire next room was dedicated to yellow, and yellow alone. Now, even if you don't know Nathan Sawaya by name, If you're watching this video, chances are you have seen this somewhere before. It is easily his most famous and recognizable creation, and it was very cool seeing it in person. Now, what I thought was interesting is that all of these pieces spilling out onto the table were completely loose. There was nothing, absolutely nothing between you and the model except for a single plaque that said, "Do not touch." This tells me one of three things. Either very young, grabby-handed children were not aware that this was the case, that they did not notice nothing was keeping these pieces down, that there is a level of respect coming from this age group that I do not typically associate with them, or more likely that their parents were doing a great job at restraining them. Whatever the case, the fact that this still remains the way it is says to me that there exists a trust between the museum, its audience, and the things here on display. And above all else, I really appreciate that. After this, there was a section showcasing the collaboration between Nathan and photographer Dan West. The idea behind this project was to create a series of photographs that subtly integrated Lego models either into the background or, in this case, into the foreground. You can see that her dress is entirely made of Lego, pieces are falling off and blowing away in the wind. Now, of course, all of the models featured in these photos were also on display in the middle of the room, and here is the dress itself. The presentation of this one in particular is exceptional. I love how all of the pieces are sort of suspended mid-air with these little strings, making it look a little bit like it did in the picture. Now, you'll notice that there are some railroad tracks back here, which are much smaller than they should be. Most of these were scaled up or scaled down and then edited into the photos. However, this one, it was a little bit harder to tell because the dress was almost one-to-one scale. It was also completely hollow. Now, I am not for a second assuming that they actually put that girl inside of this dress because that would be extremely uncomfortable and very impractical. But it does make me wonder if at some point in the process that was the original idea. Maybe not, but it is interesting. Last but not least, this final portion was all about a beloved carpet. Okay, so this part might be hard to explain if you've never been to Portland and you've never been to the PDX airport. Because at the airport, there used to be this carpet, and it was very popular. Which is an understatement. Its design was so ridiculously and phenomenally loved by locals and visitors from all across the world that when they decided to retire and replace it, you can imagine that there was outrage. And that year, they rolled up an actual piece of it and made it the Grand Marshal of the annual Rose Parade. I am not kidding. A carpet was that year's Grand Marshal. I think that says enough. Basically, this design is now kind of a symbol of the city. So Nathan, of course, wanted to honor that by creating this display that was exclusive to OMSI in Portland. Now, I want to focus on this one in particular in the far corner here because in person, this thing was crazy. Like, it was so weird to look at, and for a good little while, I could not figure out exactly what was going on, because there actually was a rope around this display, so I couldn't get up close and personal. At this point, I am fairly certain that all of these are sloped pieces, and it just captures light and shadows in such a strange way. I don't think it's showing up very well on camera, but again, if you move left and right, it just boggles your mind, and it's amazing to me that it is so simple, but so incredibly effective. And I guess you could say that is the art of the brick. Did you see what I did there? Once again, this is just a taste of everything this exposition has to offer, and I can only recommend seeing it yourself. At the time of this recording, the show is still on display in Portland for a couple more weeks, so if you're in the area, hurry up and go check it out while it lasts. If you're watching this video a little later down the line, there will be a link in the description to Nathan's website where you can see the current and upcoming schedule, so check that out as well, and best of luck. That just about wraps up this special episode of Builder's Block. Now here's a fun game you can play. Go back and count how many times I said the words love, amazing, awesome, cool, incredible, impressive, or interesting, then tally them up and post your results. I definitely might have come across as a little repetitive over the course of this video, but can you really blame me? Words can only go so far. Let me know which of the models I showed off today were your personal favorites, and if you'd like to see your own creations appear on the show at some point in the future, you can always send them my way to contactrollout@gmail.com. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to give the builders featured here some well-deserved attention. On the next episode, I'll be returning to the original format and going over the daily creations I built myself in the month of March, so make sure you're subscribed and don't miss it, but until then, this has been Rollout, signing off.